we have put together a collection of horror stories to help you sleep, with rain sounds in the background to help you relax. Sleep well. The night hung heavy with an ominous stillness as Amelia Hawthorne stood on the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the looming silhouette of the mansion. The moon cast an ethereal glow over the landscape, illuminating the twisted branches of ancient trees and casting long shadows across the overgrown path leading to the wrought iron gates. As she approached, a sense of foreboding washed over her, sending a shiver down her spine. The mansion stood like a dark sentinel, its weathered stone walls bearing witness to decades of secrets and whispers. Ivy clung to its facade, weaving a tangled web of deceit that seemed to whisper promises of untold horrors lurking within. With each step, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots echoed through the night, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that enveloped the forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying foliage, a tangible reminder of the passage of time and the relentless march of nature, reclaiming what was once lost. As she reached the gates, they groaned in protest, their rusted hinges protesting against the intrusion of an outsider. But Amelia paid them no mind, her gaze fixed on the mansion beyond. The moonlight danced across its weathered facade, casting eerie shadows that seemed to come alive in the darkness. With a deep breath, Amelia pushed open the gates and stepped into the overgrown garden, her senses on high alert. The path ahead was obscured by tangled undergrowth, the twisted branches reaching out like gnarled fingers to ensnare the unwary traveler. As she made her way towards the mansion, each step brought her closer to the heart of the mystery that had drawn her here. The wind whispered secrets through the trees, carrying echoes of the past that seemed to swirl around her like ghostly apparitions. Finally, she reached the towering oak doors of the mansion, their once grandeur now faded and worn with age. With a trembling hand, she reached out and pushed them open, the creak of hinges echoing through the empty halls beyond. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the scent of decay, a palpable reminder of the mansion's long-forgotten history. Shadows danced in the dim light, playing tricks on her mind and conjuring visions of horrors long since past. But Amelia pressed on, her curiosity driving her forward into the heart of the darkness. For she knew that within these walls lay the answers she sought, waiting to be uncovered in the shadows of the haunted mansion. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with the weight of centuries, old secrets, clinging to the walls like cobwebs spun by ghosts of the past. Amelia's footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors, each one a testament to the passage of time and the stories that lay buried beneath the layers of dust and decay. The flickering light of her lantern cast long shadows on the cracked plaster walls, illuminating faded portraits of long-forgotten ancestors and tarnished silver candelabras that once adorned grand dining tables. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like delicate lace, their silken strands swaying gently in the still air. Amelia's heart raced with excitement as she made her way through the labyrinthine halls, her fingers trailing along the peeling wallpaper as she searched for clues to unlock the mysteries of the mansion's past. Each room held its own secrets, each corner a potential hiding place for the truth she sought. In the library, she pored over ancient tomes and crumbling manuscripts, their pages yellowed with age and their ink faded to barely legible scribbles. She pieced together fragments of history, uncovering tales of love and betrayal, of triumph and tragedy, each one a thread in the rich tapestry of the mansion's past. But as she delved deeper into the archives, strange things began to happen. Books shifted on their shelves when her back was turned, their whispered secrets teasing the edges of her consciousness. Shadows flitted across the walls, fleeting glimpses of figures long gone, their presence felt but never seen. Undeterred, Amelia pressed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity to uncover the truth. She knew that the answers she sought were close at hand, hidden within the crumbling pages of history, waiting to be brought to light. As the hours stretched into the night, the mansion seemed to come alive around her, its secrets pulsing in time with her racing heartbeat. And though the darkness threatened to swallow her whole, she knew that she could not turn back now, for the truth was within her grasp, waiting to be uncovered in the shadows of the haunted mansion. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with the weight of centuries, old secrets clinging to the walls like cobwebs spun by ghosts of the past. Amelia's footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors, each one a testament to the passage of time and the stories that lay buried beneath the layers of dust and decay. The flickering light of her lantern cast long shadows on the cracked plaster walls, illuminating faded portraits of long-forgotten ancestors and tarnished silver candelabras that once adorned grand dining tables. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like delicate lace, their silken strands swaying gently in the still air. Amelia's heart raced with excitement as she made her way through the labyrinthine halls, her fingers trailing along the peeling wallpaper as she searched for clues to unlock the mysteries of the mansion's past. Each room held its own secrets, each corner a potential hiding place for the truth she sought. In the library, she pored over ancient tomes and crumbling manuscripts, their pages yellowed with age, and their ink faded to barely legible scribbles. She pieced together fragments of history, uncovering tales of love and betrayal, of triumph and tragedy, each one a thread in the rich tapestry of the mansion's past. But as she delved deeper into the archives, strange things began to happen. Books shifted on their shelves when her back was turned, their whispered secrets teasing the edges of her consciousness. Shadows flitted across the walls, fleeting glimpses of figures long gone, their presence felt but never seen. Undeterred, Amelia pressed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity to uncover the truth. She knew that the answers she sought were close at hand, hidden within the crumbling pages of history waiting to be brought to light. As the hours stretched into the night, the mansion seemed to come alive around her, its secrets pulsing in time with her racing heartbeat. And though the darkness threatened to swallow her whole, she knew that she could not turn back now, for the truth was within her grasp, waiting to be uncovered in the shadows of the haunted mansion. As the midnight hour approached, the mansion seemed to hold its breath, anticipation hanging heavy in the air like a shroud. Amelia stood at the threshold of the grand ballroom, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared to confront the darkness that lurked within. The room was bathed in an eerie glow, moonlight streaming through stained glass windows and casting fragmented shadows across the polished marble floor. The air was thick with tension, every whisper of movement echoing like thunder in the silence. At the far end of the room, Ezekiel Blackwood stood, his figure silhouetted against the dim light. His eyes gleamed with a malevolent energy, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips as he regarded Amelia with cold indifference. "So, you've come to challenge me, Miss Hawthorne," he said, his voice smooth as silk but laced with a venomous edge. "Do you truly believe you can stop me?" Amelia squared her shoulders, her resolve unwavering despite the fear that threatened to consume her. "I know what you're planning, Ezekiel," she replied, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "And I won't let you unleash that kind of darkness upon the world." A flicker of amusement danced in Ezekiel's eyes as he stepped forward, his movements fluid and predatory. "You underestimate me, Miss Hawthorne," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You may have uncovered the secrets of this mansion, but you have yet to grasp the true extent of my power." With a wave of his hand, the shadows around them seemed to come alive, swirling and coalescing into a sinister form. The air crackled with energy as the spirits trapped within the mansion stirred, their ethereal presence filling the room with an oppressive weight. But Amelia refused to back down, her gaze locked with Ezekiel's as she braced herself for the battle that lay ahead. She knew that she was outmatched, that the forces arrayed against her were beyond anything she had ever faced. But she also knew that she could not let fear dictate her actions, not when so much was at stake. With a silent prayer on her lips, Amelia stepped forward, her every movement a testament to her determination. The air seemed to shimmer around her as she raised her hand, channeling the latent energy that coursed through her veins. And then, with a flash of light and a deafening roar, the final confrontation began. The mansion shook to its very foundations as the forces of light and darkness clashed in a battle that would determine the fate of not only the haunted mansion, but also the world beyond its walls. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. As the dust settled and the echoes of the final confrontation faded into silence, Amelia stood amidst the wreckage of the grand ballroom, her chest heaving with exertion, and her mind reeling from the intensity of the battle that had just taken place. The air was thick with the scent of burnt ozone and the lingering traces of magic, a testament to the power that had been unleashed within the mansion's walls. Slowly, cautiously, Amelia surveyed the scene before her. The once opulent ballroom lay in ruins, its grandeur reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Cracks marred the polished marble floor, and fragments of stained glass littered the ground like fallen stars. But amidst the destruction, there was a sense of peace, a quiet calm that seemed to settle over the room like a protective blanket. With a weary sigh, Amelia turned her attention to Ezekiel Blackwood, the enigmatic figure who had sought to harness the power of the spirits for his own nefarious purposes. His form lay sprawled on the ground, his eyes closed and his chest still, a silent testament to the folly of his ambition. As she approached, a sense of sadness washed over her. Despite his actions, despite the darkness that had consumed him, Amelia couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy for the man who had once been so consumed by his desire for power. In the end, he had been nothing more than a pawn in a game much larger than himself, a casualty of forces beyond his control. But there was no time for mourning, no time for regret. The mansion was silent once more, its dark secrets buried along with the spirits that had haunted its halls. With a sense of determination burning in her heart, Amelia knew that her work here was far from over. With one last look around the ruined ballroom, Amelia turned and made her way back through the labyrinthine corridors of the mansion. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its silvery light over the overgrown gardens and mist-shrouded woods beyond. As she emerged from the shadows of the forest, a sense of peace washed over her. The haunted mansion was behind her now, its mysteries laid to rest alongside the spirits that had once called it home. But Amelia knew that her journey was far from over. There were still mysteries waiting to be uncovered, still adventures waiting to be had. With a renewed sense of purpose burning in her heart, Amelia Hawthorne set out once more into the unknown, her footsteps echoing through the darkness as she ventured forth into a future filled with endless possibilities. And though the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, she knew that she would face it with courage and determination, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. For wherever there were secrets waiting to be uncovered, there she would be, a seeker of truth in a world filled with shadows. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the desolate landscape that surrounded Brookhaven Asylum. Dr. Evelyn Green stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the crumbling facade of the abandoned institution. It loomed before her like a silent sentinel, its windows broken and its walls cloaked in shadows. A chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down Dr. Green's spine as she stepped forward, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of a childhood spent in the shadow of the asylum's imposing presence. She remembered the whispers of the townsfolk, the hushed tales of madness and despair that had always surrounded Brookhaven. As she drew closer, Dr. Green felt a sense of unease settle over her like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten sins, and she could almost hear the anguished cries of the asylum's former inhabitants echoing in the darkness. With a trembling hand, Dr. Green reached out and pushed open the rusted gates that barred her path. They groaned in protest, protesting the intrusion of an outsider into their long-abandoned domain. But Dr. Green paid them no mind, her gaze fixed on the decaying facade of the asylum looming before her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was her chance to uncover the truth, to confront the demons that had haunted her for so long. With each step she took, the memories grew stronger, pulling her deeper into the abyss of her past. As she crossed the threshold into the asylum's shadowy interior, Dr. Green felt a sense of foreboding settle over her like a shroud. The walls seemed to close in around her, their peeling paint and crumbling plaster bearing silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. But Dr. Green pressed on, her determination unwavering in the face of the unknown. She would not be deterred by the whispers of the past, nor by the specters that lurked in the darkness, for she knew that only by confronting her demon head-on could she ever hope to find peace. And so, with a resolute step, Dr. Evelyn Green ventured further into the heart of Brookhaven Asylum, her fate intertwined with the echoes of its haunted memories. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the desolate landscape that surrounded Brookhaven Asylum. Dr. Evelyn Green stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the crumbling facade of the abandoned institution. It loomed before her like a silent sentinel, its windows broken and its walls cloaked in shadows. A chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down Dr. Green's spine as she stepped forward, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of a childhood spent in the shadow of the asylum's imposing presence. She remembered the whispers of the townsfolk, the hushed tales of madness and despair that had always surrounded Brookhaven. As she drew closer, Dr. Green felt a sense of unease settle over her like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten sins, and she could almost hear the anguished cries of the asylum's former inhabitants echoing in the darkness. With a trembling hand, Dr. Green reached out and pushed open the rusted gates that barred her path. They groaned in protest, protesting the intrusion of an outsider into their long-abandoned domain. But Dr. Green paid them no mind, her gaze fixed on the decaying facade of the asylum looming before her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was her chance to uncover the truth, to confront the demons that had haunted her for so long. With each step she took, the memories grew stronger, pulling her deeper into the abyss of her past. As she crossed the threshold into the asylum's shadowy interior, Dr. Green felt a sense of foreboding settle over her like a shroud. The walls seemed to close in around her, their peeling paint and crumbling plaster bearing silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. But Dr. Green pressed on, her determination unwavering in the face of the unknown. She would not be deterred by the whispers of the past, nor by the specters that lurked in the darkness, for she knew that only by confronting her demons head-on could she ever hope to find peace. And so, with a resolute step, Dr. Evelyn Green ventured further into the heart of Brookhaven Asylum, her fate intertwined with the echoes of its haunted memories. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the desolate landscape that surrounded Brookhaven Asylum. Dr. Evelyn Green stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the crumbling facade of the abandoned institution. It loomed before her like a silent sentinel, its windows broken and its walls cloaked in shadows. A chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down Dr. Green's spine as she stepped forward, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of a childhood spent in the shadow of the asylum's imposing presence. She remembered the whispers of the townsfolk, the hushed tales of madness and despair that had always surrounded Brookhaven. As she drew closer, Dr. Green felt a sense of unease settle over her like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten sins, and she could almost hear the anguished cries of the asylum's former inhabitants echoing in the darkness. With a trembling hand, Dr. Green reached out and pushed open the rusted gates that barred her path. They groaned in protest, protesting the intrusion of an outsider into their long-abandoned domain. But Dr. Green paid them no mind, her gaze fixed on the decaying facade of the asylum looming before her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was her chance to uncover the truth, to confront the demons that had haunted her for so long. With each step she took, the memories grew stronger, pulling her deeper into the abyss of her past. As she crossed the threshold into the asylum's shadowy interior, Dr. Green felt a sense of foreboding settle over her like a shroud. The walls seemed to close in around her, their peeling paint and crumbling plaster bearing silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. But Dr. Green pressed on, her determination unwavering in the face of the unknown. She would not be deterred by the whispers of the past, nor by the specters that lurked in the darkness, for she knew that only by confronting her demon's head on could she ever hope to find peace. And so, with a resolute step, Dr. Evelyn Green ventured further into the heart of Brookhaven Asylum, her fate intertwined with the echoes of its haunted memories. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the desolate landscape that surrounded Brookhaven Asylum. Dr. Evelyn Green stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the crumbling facade of the abandoned institution. It loomed before her like a silent sentinel, its windows broken and its walls cloaked in shadows. A chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down Dr. Green's spine as she stepped forward, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of a childhood spent in the shadow of the asylum's imposing presence. She remembered the whispers of the townsfolk, the hushed tales of madness and despair that had always surrounded Brookhaven. As she drew closer, Dr. Green felt a sense of unease settle over her like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten sins, and she could almost hear the anguished cries of the asylum's former inhabitants echoing in the darkness. With a trembling hand, Dr. Green reached out and pushed open the rusted gates that barred her path. They groaned in protest, protesting the intrusion of an outsider into their long-abandoned domain. But Dr. Green paid them no mind, her gaze fixed on the decaying facade of the asylum looming before her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was her chance to uncover the truth, to confront the demons that had haunted her for so long. With each step she took, the memories grew stronger, pulling her deeper into the abyss of her past. As she crossed the threshold into the asylum's shadowy interior, Dr. Green felt a sense of foreboding settle over her like a shroud. The walls seemed to close in around her, their peeling paint and crumbling plaster bearing silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. But Dr. Green pressed on, her determination unwavering in the face of the unknown. She would not be deterred by the whispers of the past, nor by the specters that lurked in the darkness, for she knew that only by confronting her demons head-on could she ever hope to find peace. And so, with a resolute step, Dr. Evelyn Green ventured further into the heart of Brookhaven Asylum, her fate intertwined with the echoes of its haunted memories. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the desolate landscape that surrounded Brookhaven Asylum. Dr. Evelyn Green stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the crumbling facade of the abandoned institution. It loomed before her like a silent sentinel, its windows broken and its walls cloaked in shadows. A chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down Dr. Green's spine as she stepped forward, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of a childhood spent in the shadow of the asylum's imposing presence. She remembered the whispers of the townsfolk, the hushed tales of madness and despair that had always surrounded Brookhaven. As she drew closer, Dr. Green felt a sense of unease settle over her like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten sins, and she could almost hear the anguished cries of the asylum's former inhabitants echoing in the darkness. With a trembling hand, Dr. Green reached out and pushed open the rusted gates that barred her path. They groaned in protest, protesting the intrusion of an outsider into their long abandoned domain. But Dr. Green paid them no mind, her gaze fixed on the decaying facade of the asylum looming before her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was her chance to uncover the truth, to confront the demons that had haunted her for so long. With each step she took, the memories grew stronger, pulling her deeper into the abyss of her past. As she crossed the threshold into the asylum's shadowy interior, Dr. Green felt a sense of foreboding settle over her like a shroud. The walls seemed to close in around her, their peeling paint and crumbling plaster bearing silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. But Dr. Green pressed on, her determination unwavering in the face of the unknown. She would not be deterred by the whispers of the past, nor by the specters that lurked in the darkness, for she knew that only by confronting her demon head-on could she ever hope to find peace. And so, with a resolute step, Dr. Evelyn Green ventured further into the heart of Brookhaven Asylum, her fate intertwined with the echoes of its haunted memories. The gravel crunched beneath Sarah Evans' worn hiking boots as she stepped out of her dusty sedan and surveyed the landscape before her. Towering trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches reaching towards the slate, gray sky like gnarled fingers of some ancient guardian. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a tangible reminder of the wilderness that surrounded her. The cabin stood nestled amidst the trees, its weathered wooden facade blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. Time had left its mark on the building, the paint peeling and windows clouded with age, but there was a rustic charm to its dilapidated appearance. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation as she approached, her heart quickening with the thrill of embarking on this solitary adventure. With a click, Sarah unlocked the cabin door and pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest against the weight of years gone by. The interior was dimly lit, shafts of sunlight filtering through the dusty windows to cast ethereal beams across the worn wooden floor. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath Sarah's hesitant footsteps. She ventured further into the cabin, her eyes drinking in every detail of her temporary sanctuary. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its cold hearth a stark contrast to the warmth it promised to bring once ignited. A threadbare rug lay scattered on the floor, its faded colors a testament to the countless feet that had trodden upon it over the years. As Sarah explored the cabin, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the sensation of unseen eyes following her every move. She tried to push aside her apprehension, chalking it up to her overactive imagination. But the unease lingered like a shadow in the corners of her mind. With a sigh, Sarah set down her duffel bag and made her way to the bedroom, her tired limbs protesting against the exertion of the journey. She threw open the curtains, flooding the room with muted daylight, and collapsed onto the unmade bed with a grateful sigh. The mattress groaned beneath her weight, a comforting reminder of the simple pleasures that awaited her in this secluded haven. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Sarah drifted off to sleep, the rhythmic beat of her heart the only sound in the stillness of the cabin. Little did she know that her journey was just beginning, and that the shadows lurking in the darkness held secrets far more sinister than she could ever imagine. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow through the windows of the cabin as Sarah slept fitfully in the stillness of the night. A soft breeze rustled the curtains, sending shadows dancing across the walls like ghostly specters in the dim light. Outside, the woods whispered secrets to one another, their ancient voices carrying on the wind. In the depths of her dreams, Sarah tossed and turned, her mind a whirlwind of fragmented images and half-formed thoughts. She found herself wandering through a labyrinth of dark corridors, the walls closing in around her with every step she took. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, suffocating her with its oppressive weight. Suddenly, Sarah awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat in the silence of the night. She lay still for a moment, straining her ears for any sign of what had disturbed her slumber. But the only sound was the steady rhythm of her own breathing. Cautiously, Sarah rose from the bed and made her way to the window, her footsteps echoing softly on the floorboards beneath her feet. She peered out into the darkness, her eyes scanning the shadowy landscape for any sign of movement, but the woods were shrouded in an impenetrable veil of darkness. Just as Sarah was about to turn away, she heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper, barely audible above the rustling of the leaves. It was as though the very air itself was speaking to her, murmuring secrets that sent shivers down her spine. Heart pounding, Sarah backed away from the window and retreated to the safety of her bed, pulling the covers tightly around her trembling form. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, that there was a rational explanation for the strange occurrences that had plagued her since her arrival at the cabin. But deep down, she knew the truth. The woods were alive with unseen forces, their whispers carrying ancient secrets that threatened to consume her whole. And as Sarah lay awake in the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes were lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, bathing the cabin in a soft, golden glow as Sarah awoke from a fitful sleep. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind like fragments of a half-remembered dream, their significance elusive yet undeniable. With a heavy sigh, she pushed herself out of bed and prepared to face the day ahead. Determined to shake off the lingering unease that had settled over her like a shroud, Sarah set out to explore the cabin once more, this time with a newfound sense of purpose. She rummaged through dusty drawers and forgotten closets, uncovering relics of the past that spoke volumes about the cabin's history. Amongst the clutter, Sarah discovered a collection of old journals, their pages yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. With trembling hands, she flipped through the delicate pages, her eyes scanning the faded ink for clues to the mysteries that lay hidden within. As she read, Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding with excitement and dread in equal measure. The journals spoke of a woman named Isadora Blackwood, a healer and herbalist who had lived in the woods centuries ago. According to legend, Isadora had been accused of witchcraft by the townsfolk and sentenced to death by hanging, a fate she had met with a curse upon her lips. Sarah's pulse quickened as she delved deeper into Isadora's story, uncovering tales of persecution and betrayal that sent a chill down her spine. It was as though the very walls of the cabin were alive with the echoes of the past, their secrets laid bare for those brave enough to seek them out. But it was not just the journals that held clues to the cabin's dark history. Sarah also stumbled upon a collection of newspaper clippings, their headlines screaming tales of tragedy and woe. Amongst them was an article detailing the grisly discovery of Isadora's remains, unearthed by a group of hikers deep in the heart of the woods. A stark reminder of the woods, a stark reminder of the horrors that had unfolded in this seemingly idyllic corner of the world. As Sarah pieced together the fragments of Isadora's life, she couldn't shake the feeling that the vengeful spirit of the witch still lingered in the shadows, her restless soul seeking justice for the wrongs that had been done to her. And as the sun dipped below the horizon once more, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Sarah knew that her journey was far from over, that the darkest secrets of the cabin had yet to be revealed. Night settled like a heavy curtain over the cabin, and as the clock struck midnight, Sarah found herself once again standing on the precipice of sleep. The air inside the room seemed charged with an otherworldly energy, and she hesitated before allowing the weight of wariness to pull her under. As her eyelids drooped, the transition from wakefulness to dreams was seamless, and Sarah found herself standing at the edge of a dense, foreboding forest. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow on twisted branches that reached out like skeletal fingers. The ground beneath her feet was damp and cold, each step producing a hollow echo that resonated through the silence. The woods seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees closing in around her until the path ahead became a narrow, winding corridor. The air was thick with an otherworldly mist, swirling and dancing with ethereal grace. A haunting melody, carried by an unseen breeze, whispered through the leaves, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. As she ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, the shadows took on a life of their own, morphing into ghostly figures that flitted at the edge of her vision. Their features remained obscured, yet their presence was palpable, like the weight of unspoken sorrows hanging heavy in the air. Sarah's surroundings shifted, and she found herself standing before a clearing, bathed in an otherworldly glow. In the center stood Isadora Blackwood, a spectral figure with eyes that burned like embers in the night. The ghostly echoes of her voice reverberated through the air, recounting the injustices that had befallen her. Torn between fear and fascination, Sarah felt compelled to listen, to bear witness to the torment etched into Isadora's spectral form. The clearing seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, each heartbeat echoing the pain of centuries gone by. Abruptly, the dreamscape shifted again, and Sarah awoke with a start in the dimly lit cabin. The transition was disorienting, leaving her momentarily uncertain of reality. The room felt colder, and an unsettling stillness hung in the air. She sat up, the echoes of Isadora's haunting melody still lingering in her mind. The line between dream and reality blurred, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits of the past were seeping into her waking world. As the night pressed on, she couldn't escape the sense that the cabin itself held its breath, concealing secrets that demanded to be unveiled. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the forest as Sarah ventured into the depths of the woods, guided by the faint light filtering through the dense canopy above. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath her boots as she pressed onward, determined to uncover the truth that lay hidden in the shadows. As she navigated the twisting paths, Sarah felt a sense of unease settle over her like a heavy shroud. The woods seemed alive with unseen eyes, watching her every move with a silent intensity that sent shivers down her spine. But she refused to be deterred, her curiosity driving her ever deeper into the heart of the forest. After what felt like hours of wandering, Sarah stumbled upon a clearing bathed in an otherworldly light. In its center stood a circle of weathered stones, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The air crackled with energy, and Sarah could sense that she was standing on the threshold of something ancient and powerful. As she stepped into the clearing, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a heavy weight. She knew that she was not alone, that the spirits of the past were watching, waiting for her to uncover the secrets that lay buried beneath the forest floor. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the silence, low and mournful, carrying with it the weight of centuries of sorrow. It was the voice of Isadora Blackwood, the vengeful spirit of the witch who'd been wronged so long ago. Her words were a haunting lament, recounting the injustices that had been done to her and the pain that had followed her into the afterlife. But as Sarah listened, she sensed a flicker of something else beneath the surface, a glimmer of hope, a longing for redemption. Isadora's spirit was trapped in a cycle of vengeance and despair, and Sarah knew that she held the key to setting her free. With trembling hands, Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, weathered amulet, a talisman of protection that she had found hidden away in the depths of the cabin. As she held it aloft, she could feel its power pulsing beneath her fingertips, a beacon of light in the darkness. With a whispered prayer, Sarah offered the amulet to Isadora, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to consume her. And as she did, she felt a shift in the air, a softening of the tension that had gripped the clearing like a vice. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the forest holding its breath as Sarah and Isadora stood on the brink of destiny. And then, with a final, mournful wail, Isadora's spirit dissipated into the night, leaving behind only the echo of her presence and the promise of a future free from the shackles of the past. As Sarah made her way back to the cabin, the weight of the world lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a sense of peace and fulfillment. She knew that her journey was far from over, that there were still mysteries to uncover and challenges to face. But for now, she allowed herself to revel in the quiet victory of a soul set free. The night hung heavy over the cabin, the darkness pressing in from all sides as Sarah prepared herself for the final confrontation with the vengeful spirit that had haunted her every step. The air crackled with tension, each breath thick with anticipation as she braced herself for the battle ahead. With trembling hands, Sarah lit a single candle, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows across the worn wooden walls. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, the stillness broken only by the faint rustle of leaves outside and the steady beat of Sarah's heart. As the minutes stretched into hours, Sarah waited in silence, her senses alert for any sign of the spirit's presence. She could feel its gaze upon her, a malevolent force lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, sending goosebumps prickling along Sarah's skin. She knew that the time had come, that she could no longer afford to wait in fear. With a steady resolve, Sarah called out into the darkness, her voice echoing through the empty cabin with a quiet determination. "Show yourself," she commanded, her words carrying the weight of centuries of sorrow and longing. For a moment, there was silence, a deafening void that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. And then, with a soft sigh, the spirit of Isadora Blackwood materialized before her, her form ethereal and translucent in the dim light. Her eyes burned with a fierce intensity, their depths swirling with emotions too complex for words. There was anger in her gaze, yes, and sorrow too. But beneath it all, Sarah could sense a glimmer of something else, a longing for peace, a yearning for redemption. With a trembling hand, Sarah reached out to the spirit, her fingers brushing against the cool, ghostly surface of Isadora's form. "I know why you're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of her own heartbeat. "I know what you seek." Isadora's gaze softened, her features softening with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "And what is it that I seek?" she asked, her voice a mere whisper on the wind. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "You seek justice," she replied, her words ringing out with a quiet conviction. "You seek peace, and I can help you find it." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, the tension thickening with each passing second. And then, with a soft sigh, Isadora's spirit began to fade, her form dissipating into the darkness like smoke on the wind. As Sarah watched, a sense of relief washed over her, leaving behind only the echo of her own beating heart and the quiet promise of a new dawn. The battle was won. The battle was won. The spirit laid to rest, and in its place, a sense of peace and fulfillment that Sarah knew would stay with her for the rest of her. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold as Sarah emerged from the cabin, her heart light with the weight of newfound freedom. The air was cool and crisp, the forest alive with the songs of birds and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breezes. As she stood on the threshold of the woods, Sarah breathed in the scent of pine and earth, feeling a sense of peace settle over her like a warm embrace. The darkness of the night seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the promise of a new day, a day filled with possibility and hope. With a smile on her lips, Sarah turned and made her way back to the cabin. The path before her bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. The journey seemed shorter now, the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders with each step she took. As she approached the cabin, Sarah paused to take one last look back at the forest, its ancient trees swaying gently in the breeze. She knew that she would carry the memories of her time here with her always, that the lessons she had learned and the challenges she had faced had shaped her in ways she could never have imagined. With a final glance, Sarah stepped over the threshold and into the warmth of the cabin, the door closing behind her with a soft click. Inside, the room was bathed in sunlight, the dust motes dancing in the golden rays that filtered through the windows. As Sarah crossed the room, she felt a sense of gratitude welling up inside her. A gratitude for the journey she had taken, for the challenges she had overcome, and for the newfound sense of purpose that now filled her heart. With a deep breath, Sarah took a seat at the writing desk, the blank page before her a canvas waiting to be filled with the stories of her journey. And as she picked up her pen and began to write, she knew that this was only the beginning, that the adventure she had embarked upon was far from over. For Sarah Evans, the writer seeking solitude and inspiration, had found so much more than she had ever dared to hope for. She had found redemption in the depths of the forest, and in doing so, had discovered the true power of justice, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And as she wrote, the words flowed freely from her pen, each sentence a testament to the journey she had taken and the person she had become. The city was a labyrinth of flickering lights and echoing footsteps, a pulsating heart of urban energy that beat with the rhythm of life. Sarah Davis emerged from the cocoon of her apartment building, stepping out into the night with a sense of anticipation that crackled in the air like static electricity. The cool breeze tugged at her hair, teasing strands of golden brown into playful dance. She adjusted the strap of her sleek black dress, the fabric clinging to her curves like a second skin, as she made her way through the labyrinth of streets toward her destination. Each step carried her closer to the rendezvous point, to the promise of a chance encounter that could change the course of her evening, perhaps even her life. The city buzzed with activity, a symphony of honking horns and distant laughter that filled the air with an electric charge. Neon signs cast a kaleidoscope of color onto the pavement, painting the world in hues of pink and blue and green. Sarah navigated the sea of strangers with practiced ease, her gaze fixed on the glowing beacon of the bar where her Tinder date awaited. As she approached the entrance, the thumping bass of music spilled out into the night, mingling with the chatter of voices and the clinking of glasses. Sarah hesitated for a moment on the threshold, her heart fluttering with a heady mix of excitement and nerves. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the adventure that lay ahead before stepping into the dimly lit interior. The bar was a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds, a sensory overload that enveloped Sarah in its embrace. The air was thick with the scent of alcohol and perfume, mingling in a heady concoction that set her senses ablaze. She scanned the crowded room, her pulse quickening as she searched for the face she had only ever seen in pictures on her phone screen. And then she saw him. Jason Reed stood at the bar, a silhouette against the neon-lit backdrop, his features obscured in shadow. But even from across the room, Sarah could sense the magnetic pull of his presence, drawing her inexorably closer. She felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins as she made her way through the throng of bodies, each step bringing her closer to the moment of reckoning. As she finally reached his side, Jason turned to face her, his eyes sparkling with mischief and charm. He flashed her a dazzling smile, and Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. In that moment, she knew that her life would never be the same again. The air hummed with anticipation as Sarah approached Jason, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat, echoing through the cavernous depths of the bar. She could feel the weight of his gaze upon her, a tangible force that seemed to draw her closer with each passing moment. Jason's smile widened as she drew near, his eyes twinkling with amusement and something deeper, something that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She forced herself to maintain her composure, to meet his gaze with a confidence she didn't quite feel. "Sarah, right?" Jason's voice was smooth as silk, a velvet whisper that sent warmth flooding through her veins. She nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from his magnetic presence. "That's me, and you must be Jason." The corners of Jason's lips quirked up in a playful grin. "Guilty as charged." The words hung in the air between them, charged with a tantalizing energy that crackled with possibility. Sarah felt a surge of excitement coursing through her veins, mingling with the nervous fluttering of her heart. They settled into a booth in the corner of the bar, the dim lighting casting their faces in shadow as they exchanged pleasantries and traded stories of their lives. Sarah found herself drawn in by Jason's easy charm and quick wit, his laughter like music to her ears. As the night wore on, the barriers between them began to melt away, leaving only the raw vulnerability of two souls connecting in the darkness. Sarah felt herself opening up to Jason in ways she never thought possible, sharing secrets and dreams as if they were old friends reunited after years apart. And yet, beneath the surface of their banter, a tension simmered, a palpable undercurrent of desire and uncertainty that hung heavy in the air. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Jason than met the eye. Jason than met the eye, something lurking beneath the surface of his charming facade. But for now, she pushed those thoughts aside, losing herself in the intoxicating whirlwind of their burgeoning connection. Little did she know that the seeds of doubt had already been planted, waiting to take root and grow into something far more sinister. The hours slipped away like grains of sand through an hourglass, each passing moment carrying Sarah deeper into the labyrinth of her evening with Jason. As they conversed, the atmosphere around them seemed to shift, the once vibrant energy of the bar giving way to a sense of quiet intensity that crackled in the air like static electricity. Sarah tried to ignore the nagging feeling of unease that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness, dismissing it as nothing more than the jitters of a first date. But with each passing minute, Jason's demeanor grew increasingly possessive, his attention focused solely on her with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She felt his gaze lingering on her like a physical caress, his words laced with an undercurrent of possessiveness that sent a chill racing down her spine. Sarah tried to maintain her composure, to laugh off his advances with a playful smile, but beneath the surface, a seed of doubt had been planted, taking root in the fertile soil of her subconscious. As the night wore on, Sarah found herself retreating further into herself, her laughter ringing hollow in her ears as she searched for an escape from the suffocating grip of Jason's presence. She excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to collect her thoughts and regain her composure. Inside the dimly lit confines of the restroom, Sarah leaned against the cool tile wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she tried to make sense of the maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she scrolled through the messages and photos exchanged with Jason in the days leading up to their date. But as she sifted through the digital remnants of their interactions, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of her stomach. There were inconsistencies in Jason's stories, discrepancies that didn't add up. She felt a knot of fear tightening in her chest as she realized that she barely knew the man sitting on the other side of the bar, that he was a stranger wearing the mask of familiarity. With trembling hands, Sarah returned to the table, her mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. She knew that she needed to confront Jason about her discoveries, to demand answers to the questions that had been gnawing at her from the shadows. But as she approached him, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled with unease, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a shroud. Little did she know that the true horrors of the night had only just begun to reveal themselves, lurking in the darkness like wolves waiting to pounce on their unsuspecting prey. The air crackled with tension as Sarah returned to the table, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat, heralding the approach of a storm. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation that lay ahead, knowing that the truths she sought might shatter the fragile facade of her evening with Jason. As she settled into her seat opposite him, Sarah's gaze met Jason's, her eyes searching his for any hint of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. But all she found was a mask of charming indifference, his features schooled into an expression of casual nonchalance. "Everything okay?" Jason's voice cut through the silence like a knife, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her reaction. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. She knew that she couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer, that she needed to confront Jason about the inconsistencies she had discovered in his stories. "I need to talk to you about something," she began, her voice barely above a whisper as she struggled to find the words to convey the depth of her uncertainty. Jason's eyebrows shot up in surprise, a flicker of curiosity dancing in his eyes. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the revelation that was about to unfold. "I've been doing some digging," she started, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. "And I've uncovered some things that don't quite add up." Jason's facade faltered for a fraction of a second, a fleeting shadow passing across his features before he regained his composure. "I'm not sure I follow," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. But Sarah wasn't about to let him off the hook that easily. She reached into her bag, pulling out her phone and holding it out for him to see. "I found discrepancies in your stories, inconsistencies that don't make sense," she explained, her voice gaining strength with each word. Jason's eyes flickered to the screen of her phone, his expression unreadable as he studied the evidence laid out before him. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a fragile moment of uncertainty. And then, with a mirthless smile, Jason looked up, his eyes meeting Sarah's with a chilling intensity. "Impressive detective work," he remarked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I'm afraid you've only scratched the surface of the truth." Sarah's blood ran cold at his words, a sense of dread settling over her like a suffocating blanket. She realized with a sinking feeling that Jason was not who he claimed to be, that beneath his charming facade lurked a darkness far deeper than she could have ever imagined. As the truth began to dawn on her, Sarah felt a surge of fear coursing through her veins, a primal instinct, urging her to flee before it was too late. But deep down, she knew that there was no escaping the horrors that lay in wait, that she was already trapped in a nightmare from which there could be no awakening. The air in the bar grew heavy with tension, a suffocating weight that pressed down on Sarah's shoulders as she faced Jason across the table. She could feel his gaze boring into her, a cold and calculating presence that sent shivers racing down her spine. "Who are you really?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. She felt a knot of dread tightening in her chest as she waited for Jason's response, knowing that the truth he held could shatter the fragile facade of her reality. Jason's lips curled into a smirk, his eyes glittering with malice as he leaned back in his chair. "Isn't it obvious?" he replied, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'm exactly who you think I am. A master of deception, a puppeteer pulling the strings of your reality." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at his words, a cold realization settling over her like a shroud. She knew now that she had been nothing more than a pawn in Jason's twisted game, a pawn whose fate hung in the balance as she teetered on the edge of oblivion. But despite the fear coursing through her veins, Sarah refused to back down, with every ounce of strength she possessed. She squared her shoulders and met Jason's gaze head on, refusing to let him see the depth of her terror. "You're sick," she spat, her words laced with venom. "You think you can manipulate people's lives for your own amusement, but you're nothing more than a coward hiding behind a mask of lies." Jason's smirk faltered for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features before he regained his composure. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he retorted, his voice icy with disdain. "You think you're so clever, so self-righteous, but you're just as much a pawn in this game as I am." Sarah felt a surge of anger coursing through her veins at his words, a fire burning bright in the darkness of her despair. She knew that she couldn't let Jason win, that she had to fight back with every ounce of strength she possessed. With a defiant glare, she pushed back her chair and rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with determination. "I won't let you control me anymore," she declared, her voice ringing out like a clarion call in the silence of the bar. "I may not be able to change the past, but I can damn well shape the future." And with that, Sarah turned on her heel and strode away from the table, leaving Jason's mocking laughter echoing in her wake. She knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions any longer. For she was Sarah Davis, and she would not rest until she had reclaimed her freedom from the clutches of darkness that threatened to consume her soul. The bar seemed to shrink around Sarah as she made her escape, the walls closing in on her like the jaws of a trap snapping shut. She could feel Jason's eyes burning into her back, his presence a looming shadow that threatened to engulf her in its suffocating embrace. With each step she took, Sarah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders, the weight of the truth she had uncovered, bearing down on her like a burden, too heavy to bear. But she refused to let it break her, refused to let the darkness consume her from within. As she reached the exit, a surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins, fueling her determination to break free from the chains that bound her to Jason's twisted game. She pushed open the door and stepped out into the cool night air, the darkness swallowing her whole as she disappeared into the shadows. But even as she fled into the night, Sarah knew that the battle was far from over. For lurking in the depths of the city, Jason waited, a predator stalking its prey with cold and calculating precision. And she knew that she could not escape him, not until she had faced him head on and emerged victorious from the crucible of her darkest fears. With each passing moment, the tension in the air grew thicker, a palpable sense of foreboding hanging over the city like a storm cloud on the horizon. Sarah could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end, a primal instinct urging her to flee before it was too late. But she refused to give in to fear, refused to let it dictate her actions any longer. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she squared her shoulders and turned back towards the heart of darkness, towards the one man who held the key to her salvation. For she knew that the only way to truly escape Jason's clutches was to face him head on, to confront the demons that lurked within and emerge victorious from the crucible of her darkest fears. And she was ready to fight for her survival with every fiber of her being, ready to reclaim her freedom from the jaws of the beast that threatened to consume her soul. The city streets stretched out before Sarah like a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, each step carrying her closer to the heart of darkness where Jason waited. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of foreboding hanging over the city like a shroud as she navigated her way through the maze of alleys and side streets. With each passing moment, Sarah could feel the weight of Jason's presence pressing down on her. His malevolent energy a tangible force that seemed to suffuse the very air around her. But she refused to let it intimidate her, refused to let fear dictate her actions any longer. As she reached the final stretch of her journey, a sense of determination surged through her veins, a fierce fire burning bright in the darkness of her despair. She knew that she could not allow Jason to continue his reign of terror, unchecked. Knew that she had to confront him head on and put an end to his twisted game once and for all. With every ounce of strength she possessed, Sarah pushed open the door to Jason's lair, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat, heralding the approach of a storm. Inside, the darkness seemed to swallow her whole, the air heavy with the scent of fear and desperation. And there, in the center of the room, stood Jason, a sinister smile playing at the corners of his lips as he watched her approach. But Sarah refused to be cowed by his malevolent presence, refused to let him break her spirit with his twisted games. "I'm done playing your games, Jason," she declared, her voice ringing out like a clarion call in the silence of the room. "It's time for this nightmare to end." Jason's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features before he regained his composure. "You think you can defeat me?" he taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're nothing but a pawn in my game, a pawn that I can crush with a single move." But Sarah refused to back down, refused to let Jason's words diminish her resolve. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she squared her shoulders and faced him head on, ready to fight for her survival with every fiber of her being. And as the final showdown unfolded, Sarah unleashed the full force of her fury upon Jason, striking blow after blow in a desperate bid to reclaim her freedom from the jaws of the beast that threatened to consume her soul. And in the end, it was not strength or power that won the day, but the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be broken by the darkness that lurked within. The echoes of Sarah's battle with Jason still lingered in the air as she emerged from the darkness, battered but unbowed, her spirit unbroken by the horror she had faced. The city street stretched out before her, a tapestry of lights and shadows that whispered of untold secrets and unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. But Sarah refused to let fear dictate her actions any longer, refused to let the darkness consume her from within. With every step she took, she felt a sense of liberation wash over her, a newfound freedom born from the ashes of her darkest fears. As she walked away from the scene of her final showdown with Jason, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a burden too heavy to bear finally lifted from her weary soul. She knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but she refused to let it break her, refused to let fear dictate her actions any longer. For she was Sarah Davis, survivor of the darkness, and she would not rest until she had reclaimed her life from the clutches of the beast that had threatened to consume her soul. With every step she took, she felt a sense of empowerment wash over her, a fierce fire, burning bright in the darkness of her despair. And as she disappeared into the shadows of the city, a sense of hope flickered to life within her, a beacon of light guiding her through the darkness that lay ahead. For she knew that no matter what trials and tribulations awaited her on the road ahead, she would face them head on, armed with the strength and resilience born from the depths of her darkest fears. And though the scars of her battle with Jason would linger, a reminder of the horrors she had faced, Sarah knew that she would emerge from the darkness stronger than ever before, ready to embrace whatever the future held with open arms. For she was Sarah Davis, survivor of the darkness, and she would not be broken by the trials of the past. With a defiant smile, she stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and determination. The mountains loomed like ancient titans, their jagged peaks piercing the heavens, shrouded in a veil of mist that clung to the air like a lover's embrace. Beneath the watchful gaze of these silent sentinels lay a hidden sanctuary, a cabin nestled amidst the dense embrace of the forest, its weathered facade a testament to the passage of time. It was here, in this remote wilderness, that Tom sought refuge from the chaos of the world, a solitary haven where he hoped to find solace and inspiration amidst the whispering shadows. With each step through the thick blanket of snow, he felt the weight of his burdens slowly melting away, replaced by a sense of quiet anticipation. The cabin beckoned to him like a siren's call, its windows aglow with the warm flicker of firelight dancing within. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, Tom stepped into the embrace of the unknown, his breath forming ghostly tendrils in the frigid air. Inside, the cabin exuded a sense of timeless tranquility, a refugee frozen in time, untouched by the outside world. The scent of pine mingled with the crackle of the fire, casting a spell of enchantment upon the weary traveler. As Tom settled into his new surroundings, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation at the nape of his neck, like the brush of unseen fingers against his skin. But he dismissed it as mere paranoia, attributing it to the isolation of the wilderness and his own overactive imagination. Night fell like a velvet curtain, cloaking the forest in a blanket of darkness. Alone in the cabin, Tom felt a sense of unease creeping into his bones, a whisper of doubt that lingered on the edges of his consciousness. And then, as if in response to his silent fears, the whispers began, a soft susurrus that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, words whispered on the edge of hearing, teasing and tantalizing, yet maddeningly elusive. Tom tried to rationalize away the voices, chalking them up to the wind playing tricks through the trees. But deep down, he knew that something sinister lurked in the shadows, a presence that defied explanation, lurking just beyond the edge of perception. And so, as the fire dwindled to embers and the night stretched on, Tom found himself ensnared in a web of uncertainty, a stranger in a land haunted by whispers, with no escape in sight. The cabin seemed to hold its breath as night descended like a shroud, enveloping everything in darkness. Tom sat by the crackling fire, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames, but his mind wandered to the unsettling events of the day. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, echoing through the timbered walls like the plaintive cries of lost souls. Tom's skepticism wavered with each passing moment, his rational mind struggling to reconcile the inexplicable with the tangible. Outside, the forest loomed like a silent sentinel, its secrets hidden beneath a blanket of snow. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of something otherworldly, a presence that lingered just beyond the edge of perception. With a shiver, Tom rose from his seat and paced the length of the cabin, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and turning in a macabre ballet, while the fire cast flickering patterns across the floor. Suddenly, a movement caught Tom's eye, a glimmer of movement in the corner of the room, fleeting and ephemeral. He turned, heart pounding in his chest, but there was nothing there save for the empty expanse of the cabin. Doubt gnawed at Tom's resolve, planting seeds of fear in his mind. He tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it clung to him like a second skin, suffocating him with its suffocating embrace. And then, just as he was about to surrender to the darkness, a voice whispered in his ear, a soft, melodic sound that sent shivers down his spine. Tom froze, his breath catching in his throat, as the voice spoke words that chilled him to the bone. "Leave this place," it whispered, a hint of desperation tinging its ethereal tones, "before it's too late." Tom's blood ran cold as the realization dawned upon him. He was not alone in the cabin. Something lingered in the shadows, something ancient and malevolent, watching and waiting with bated breath. With a trembling hand, Tom reached for the door, his mind reeling with fear and uncertainty. But as he stepped out into the night, the whispers followed him, a haunting refrain that echoed in the depths of his soul. And so, as the darkness swallowed him whole, Tom knew that he had ventured into a realm beyond his understanding, a realm where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the whispers of the night held sway over all who dared to listen. The cabin stood silent and brooding as Tom returned from his nocturnal vigil, the echoes of the whispers still ringing in his ears like a haunting melody. He hesitated at the threshold, a sense of foreboding weighing heavy upon his shoulders. But the lure of warmth and safety drew him back inside. With each passing moment, the supernatural phenomena intensified, casting the cabin in an eerie light. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes, while the air crackled with a palpable energy, a sense of otherness that permeated every corner of the room. Tom's rational mind rebelled against the onslaught of the inexplicable, searching desperately for a logical explanation to cling to. But the evidence of a haunting was undeniable. The cryptic messages etched into the walls, the whispers that echoed through the night, the sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Driven by a newfound determination, Tom set out to unravel the mystery of the cabin's dark past, hoping to uncover the truth behind the whispers that haunted his every waking moment. He combed through dusty tomes and weathered journals, piecing together fragments of a story long forgotten. As he delved deeper into the secrets of the cabin, Tom uncovered tales of tragedy and despair. A family torn apart by greed and betrayal, their restless spirits condemned to wander the wilderness for all eternity. And at the heart of it all stood the enigmatic figure of the cabin's former owner, a man consumed by darkness, his soul bound to the land he once called home. But even as Tom unearthed the truth, the malevolent presence that lurked in the shadows refused to be silenced. It toyed with his mind, twisting his thoughts and manipulating his perceptions until he could no longer trust his own senses. And so, as the night wore on and the whispers grew louder, Tom found himself teetering on the brink of madness, a lone figure adrift in a sea of darkness with no shore in sight. But still, he pressed on, driven by a burning desire to confront the entity that held him captive in its thrall. For he knew that only by facing his deepest fears could he hope to break free from the shackles of the past and emerge victorious from the darkness that threatened to consume him whole. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow upon the snowy landscape as Tom ventured into the forest, his footsteps muffled by the soft blanket of snow. The trees loomed overhead like ancient guardians, their twisted branches reaching out to ensnare the unwary traveler. With each step, Tom felt the weight of the forest pressing down upon him, a tangible presence that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Shadows danced amidst the trees, their movements fluid and sinuous, as if guided by some unseen hand. But Tom pressed on, his resolve unwavering despite the overwhelming sense of unease that gnawed at his insides. He had come too far to turn back now, too close to uncovering the truth behind the haunting that plagued the cabin. As he ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, Tom's senses were assailed by a cacophony of sound, the mournful cry of the wind, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a lone wolf. But beneath it all, he could hear another sound, a soft, melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth. Following the sound like a siren's call, Tom soon found himself standing before a clearing bathed in moonlight, a place of ethereal beauty, untouched by the ravages of time. And there, amidst the whispering trees, he saw her, a figure cloaked in shadow, her features obscured by the darkness. For a moment, Tom hesitated, unsure of what he would find lurking within the shadows. But then, with a sense of determination burning in his chest, he stepped forward, his heart pounding in his ears. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness of the night. "What do you want from me?" The figure remained silent, her form swaying gently in the breeze. And then, with a voice like silk, she spoke, a single word that sent a shiver down Tom's spine. "Freedom," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves. "Freedom from the chains that bind us, from the darkness that holds us captive." Tom's mind reeled at her words, his thoughts spinning in a maelstrom of confusion and fear. But then, as if guided by some unseen force, he reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the cold, unyielding surface of the darkness. And in that moment, as their worlds collided in a symphony of light and shadow, Tom knew that he had ventured into a realm beyond his understanding, a realm where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the whispers of the night held sway over all who dared to listen. The air crackled with tension as Tom stood on the precipice of the unknown, his heart hammering in his chest like a drumbeat heralding the coming storm. Before him loomed the shadowy figure cloaked in darkness and mystery, her presence both alluring and terrifying. With each passing moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting with bated anticipation for the inevitable clash between light and darkness, between truth and illusion. And in the depths of Tom's soul, a fire burned bright, a spark of defiance amidst the encroaching darkness. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice ringing out clear and strong despite the fear that threatened to consume him whole. "What do you want from me?" The figure remained silent, her form swaying gently in the breeze as if caught in the ebb and flow of some unseen current. But there was a weight to her presence, a gravity that pulled at Tom's very essence, drawing him inexorably closer to the edge of oblivion. And then, with a voice like silk, she spoke, a single word that sent a shiver down Tom's spine, a word that echoed in the recesses of his mind like a forgotten memory. "Freedom," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves. "Freedom from the chains that bind us, from the darkness that holds us captive." Tom's mind reeled at her words, his thoughts spinning in a maelstrom of confusion and doubt. But then, with a newfound sense of purpose burning in his chest, he stepped forward, his gaze locked with hers in a silent challenge. "I will not be your pawn," he declared, his voice resonating with a strength that surprised even him. "I will not let you control me, manipulate me, consume me." And in that moment, as their worlds collided in a symphony of light and shadow, Tom knew that he had ventured into a realm beyond his understanding, a realm where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the whispers of the night held sway over all who dared to listen. With a final surge of determination, Tom reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the darkness that surrounded him. And in that instant, the world exploded into a kaleidoscope of light and sound, as the barrier between worlds shattered like glass, and Tom stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The dawn broke like a promise on the horizon, casting its golden light upon the snow-covered landscape as Tom emerged from the depths of the forest, his soul heavy with the weight of the night's revelations. Behind him, the cabin stood silent and brooding, its secrets buried beneath layers of snow and shadow. As he made his way back to civilization, Tom felt a sense of relief wash over him, a feeling of liberation born from the knowledge that he had faced his deepest fears and emerged victorious. But beneath the veneer of triumph, a seed of doubt lingered, a nagging suspicion that the darkness that had plagued the cabin was not so easily vanquished. With each step, Tom felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. The whispers that had haunted his every waking moment fell silent, their siren song fading into the recesses of memory. And yet, as he glanced back at the cabin one final time, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving something behind, a part of himself that had been forever altered by the ordeal. But he knew that he could not linger in the shadows, that he had to press forward, ever forward, towards the light. And so, with a final glance over his shoulder, Tom turned his back on the cabin and set out into the world, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the wilderness. Behind him, the whispers of the night lingered on the edge of hearing, a haunting refrain that whispered of secrets yet untold. But Tom paid them no heed, for he knew that he had faced his demons and emerged stronger for it. And as he disappeared into the distance, the cabin stood silent and empty, its walls holding the echoes of a story that would forever remain untold. The town of Whispering Pines lay nestled beneath a shroud of mist, its streets winding like veins through the heart of the dense forest that encased it. Tall, looming trees whispered secrets to the wind, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. In the dim light of dawn, the town seemed frozen in time, a relic of a bygone era where shadows danced with the memories of those long forgotten. Detective Sarah Bennett stepped out of her car, the chill of the morning air seeping into her bones like an omen of things to come. She pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame, the weight of her past bearing down on her with every step, the scars of old wounds etched deep into her skin, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within her soul. As she made her way through the deserted streets, Detective Bennett couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled like a cloak upon her shoulders. It wasn't just the fog that obscured her vision, or the eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. It was something deeper, something primal that whispered of danger lurking just beyond the veil of shadows. She reached the crime scene, a dilapidated house at the edge of town, its weathered facade a testament to the passage of time. Police cars lined the street, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow that danced across the overgrown lawn. Detective Bennett's stomach churned as she stepped over the threshold, the stench of death hanging thick in the air like a noose around her neck. Inside, the scene was a tableau of horror, a twisted masterpiece painted in shades of crimson and despair. The victim lay sprawled across the floor, their lifeless eyes staring into the abyss with a silent plea for mercy. Blood stained the walls like macabre graffiti, the metallic tang of it mingling with the musty scent of decay. Detective Bennett's heart hammered in her chest as she surveyed the carnage, her mind racing to make sense of the senseless. Who could commit such atrocities? And why here, in this quiet town forgotten by time? But as she searched for answers amidst the chaos, a chill swept through her, sending shivers down her spine. It wasn't just the killer she needed to fear. It was the shadows of the past, lurking in every corner, waiting to swallow her whole. With a steely resolve, Detective Bennett pushed aside her doubts and fears, knowing that she was the only thing standing between the town and the darkness that threatened to consume it. For beneath the surface of Whispering Pines, something ancient and malevolent stirred, its whispers echoing through the empty streets like a harbinger of doom. And as Detective Bennett gazed into the abyss, she knew that the journey ahead would test not only her courage, but her very soul. For in the heart of darkness, there were no heroes, only survivors, clinging to the faint glimmer of hope in a world consumed by shadows. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the thick blanket of mist that enveloped Whispering Pines, casting the town in an eerie twilight that seemed to defy the passage of time. Detective Sarah Bennett stood outside the crime scene, her breath forming a ghostly mist in the chill air as she surveyed the dilapidated house before her. The memory of the previous night's horrors lingered like a foul taste in her mouth, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. With a sense of grim determination, Detective Bennett stepped over the threshold and into the darkness beyond. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of decay, mingling with the metallic tang of blood that seemed to seep into every pore of the old wooden floors. The scene before her was a grotesque tableau, a twisted nightmare come to life. The victim lay sprawled across the floor, their lifeless eyes staring sightlessly into the void. Blood pooled around them like a macabre halo, casting long shadows that danced across the walls like wraiths in the night. Detective Bennett's heart sank as she took in the extent of the carnage, her mind racing to make sense of the senseless. As she moved through the room, collecting evidence and piecing together the fragments of a shattered life, Detective Bennett couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled like a weight upon her shoulders. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that disturbed her. It was the sense of something lurking just beyond the edge of perception, waiting to pounce when least expected. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, jolting Detective Bennett from her reverie. It was one of the local officers, a young man with a haunted look in his eyes. He gestured towards a corner of the room, where a scrap of paper lay crumpled on the floor. Detective Bennett approached cautiously, her senses on high alert. As she picked up the paper and unfolded it, her blood ran cold. Scrawled across the page in a spidery hand were the words, "You can't hide from your past, detective. The shadows are watching." A chill ran down Detective Bennett's spine as she read the ominous message, her mind racing with questions. Who could have left it? And what did they know about her past? With a sense of urgency, Detective Bennett gathered up the evidence and made her way back to her car. As she drove through the mist, shrouded streets of Whispering Pines, a sense of foreboding settled over her like a suffocating blanket, for she knew that the darkness that had claimed one life was far from finished, and that she was the only thing standing between the town and the abyss. The early morning mist hung like a veil over Whispering Pines, cloaking the town in an eerie silence that seemed to swallow the sounds of life itself. Detective Sarah Bennett sat at her desk in the dimly lit police station, surrounded by a mountain of evidence from the previous night's murder scene. The words of the ominous message echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of perception. With a steely resolve, Detective Bennett sifted through the evidence, each piece a puzzle waiting to be solved. As she combed through witness statements and forensic reports, a pattern began to emerge, linking the victims to her own troubled past. But try as she might, Detective Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she was missing, something lurking just beyond her grasp. Frustration gnawed at her insides as she pored over the files, searching for any clue that might lead her closer to the truth. But the answers remained elusive, hidden behind a veil of secrets and lies that seemed impossible to penetrate. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, causing Detective Bennett to startle in her chair. It was her partner, Detective Jameson, a grizzled veteran with a sharp mind and a penchant for dark humor. He sauntered over to her desk, a cup of steaming coffee in hand, and flashed her a crooked grin. "Any luck?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. Detective Bennett sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "Nothing yet," she admitted, her tone heavy with defeat. "But I can't shake the feeling that there's something I'm missing, something staring me right in the face." Detective Jameson nodded sympathetically, taking a sip of his coffee before speaking again. "Well, you know what they say," he said with a wry grin. "The devil is in the details. Maybe it's time to take a closer look." Inspired by her partner's words, Detective Bennett returned to her work with renewed determination, poring over the evidence with a fresh set of eyes. And as she delved deeper into the mysteries of Whispering Pines, she began to uncover secrets long buried beneath the surface. Secrets that threatened to shatter the fragile illusion of safety that had cloaked the town for so long. But with each new revelation came a sense of unease, a creeping dread that whispered of dangers yet to come. For Detective Bennett knew that the darkness that had claimed one life was far from finished, and that she was walking a dangerous path with no end in sight. And as the shadows deepened around her, she braced herself for the horrors that awaited, knowing that only by confronting the darkness could she hope to bring light to the shadows of Whispering Pines. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its silver light upon the deserted streets of Whispering Pines. Detective Sarah Bennett stood outside the secluded cabin nestled deep within the forest, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared to confront the man she believed to be responsible for the brutal murders that had plagued the town. With a sense of grim determination, Detective Bennett stepped over the threshold and into the darkness beyond. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, the only sound the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. As she moved through the dimly lit interior, her senses on high alert, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, sending a shiver down Detective Bennett's spine. "I've been expecting you, Detective," it said, the words dripping with malice. Detective Bennett whirled around to find herself face to face with Nathaniel Blackwood, the reclusive artist she believed to be the killer. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, their depths as black as the abyss, as he regarded her with a mixture of amusement and contempt. "What do you want?" Detective Bennett demanded. her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. Blackwood smiled, a twisted grin that sent a chill down Detective Bennett's spine. "I want justice," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "For all the wrongs that have been done to me, to this town, and you, Detective, are going to help me get it." Detective Bennett's blood ran cold as she realized the full extent of Blackwood's madness. He believed himself to be a vigilante, a champion of the downtrodden, but in reality, he was nothing more than a cold-blooded killer, driven by a thirst for revenge. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Detective Bennett knew that she had to stop Blackwood before he could claim another victim. But as she moved to apprehend him, she found herself ensnared in his web of deceit, trapped like a fly in a spider's web. As the darkness closed in around her, Detective Bennett knew that she was running out of time. For the shadows that had claimed one life were now closing in around her, threatening to consume her whole. And as she faced off against Blackwood in a battle of wills and wits, she knew that only one of them would emerge from the darkness alive. The night hung heavy over whispering pines, the moon obscured behind a thick blanket of clouds that seemed to swallow the stars whole. Detective Sarah Bennett stood alone in the darkness, the cabin looming before her like a specter from a nightmare. Inside, Nathaniel Blackwood waited, his twisted mind plotting its next move in the deadly game he had set in motion. With a sense of foreboding, Detective Bennett stepped over the threshold and into the abyss beyond. The air was thick with tension, every shadow seeming to shift and writhe with unseen menace. As she moved through the dimly lit interior, her senses on high alert, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, sending a shiver down Detective Bennett's spine. "Welcome to my humble abode, Detective," it said, the words dripping with malice. Detective Bennett whirled around to find herself face to face with Blackwood, his eyes gleaming in the darkness like twin points of fire. He smiled, a cold, humorless smile that sent a chill down Detective Bennett's spine. "You've come to stop me, haven't you, Detective?" Blackwood said, his voice low and dangerous. "To put an end to my little game before it's even begun." Detective Bennett's jaw clenched as she met Blackwood's gaze, her resolve hardening like steel. "Your game ends now, Blackwood," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. "There have been enough innocent lives lost because of your twisted vendetta." Blackwood chuckled, the sound sending a shiver down Detective Bennett's spine. "Innocent lives," he said, his voice dripping with scorn. "There are no innocent lives in Whispering Pines, Detective. Only sinners and victims." With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Detective Bennett realized that Blackwood was beyond reason, beyond redemption. He was a force of nature, a predator stalking his prey through the shadows of the night. But as she moved to apprehend him, she found herself ensnared in his web of deceit, trapped like a fly in a spider's web. And as the darkness closed in around her, she knew that she was running out of time. For the shadows that had claimed one life were now closing in around her, threatening to consume her whole. And as she faced off against Blackwood in a battle of wills and wits, she knew that only one of them would emerge from the darkness alive. The cabin seemed to pulsate with malevolent energy as Detective Sarah Bennett and Nathaniel Blackwood stood locked in a deadly standoff. The air crackled with tension, each breath heavy with the weight of impending doom. But amidst the darkness and despair, Detective Bennett's resolve remained unyielding, her eyes blazing with determination as she prepared to confront the evil that lurked within. "You can't hide from the truth, Blackwood," Detective Bennett declared, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Your reign of terror ends here and now." Blackwood's lips curled into a sinister smile, his eyes gleaming with a madness that sent shivers down Detective Bennett's spine. "Oh, Detective," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you're up against. The shadows that haunt this town are far darker than you could ever imagine. With a sudden surge of rage, Blackwood lunged at Detective Bennett, his movements fluid and graceful like a predator on the hunt. But she was ready, her training kicking in as she sidestepped his attack and delivered a swift blow to his side. Blackwood staggered back, a look of surprise flickering across his face before it was replaced by a cold, calculating glare. "You may have stopped me for now, Detective," Blackwood hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "But the darkness that I represent will never truly be vanquished. It will always find a way to rise again, to consume everything in its path." But Detective Bennett refused to be intimidated by Blackwood's empty threats. She knew that she had to press on, to uncover the truth behind the darkness that had engulfed Whispering Pines before it was too late. With a sense of grim determination, Detective Bennett turned her attention back to the evidence, scouring it for any clue that might lead her closer to the truth. And as she delved deeper into the mysteries of the town, she began to uncover secrets long buried beneath the surface. Secrets that threatened to shatter the fragile illusion of safety that had cloaked Whispering Pines for so long. But with each new revelation came a sense of unease, a creeping dread that whispered of dangers yet to come. For Detective Bennett knew that the darkness that had claimed one life was far from finished, and that she was walking a dangerous path with no end in sight. But she refused to back down. For in the heart of darkness, there was always a glimmer of light, a beacon of hope that refused to be extinguished. And as Detective Bennett faced off against the shadows that threatened to consume her, she knew that she would do whatever it took to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. The night had grown thick with darkness, the moon veiled behind a curtain of ominous clouds that hung low in the sky. Detective Sarah Bennett stood alone in the heart of Whispering Pines, the weight of the town's secrets pressing down upon her like a heavy cloak. But amidst the shadows that danced in the moonlight, her resolve remained unshaken, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. With a sense of grim determination, Detective Bennett made her way through the deserted streets, her footsteps echoing in the silence like a drumbeat of impending doom. She knew that the time had come to confront the evil that lurked within the heart of the town, to face off against the darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. As she approached the secluded cabin where Nathaniel Blackwood awaited, a chill ran down Detective Bennett's spine. She could feel the malevolent energy that radiated from the cabin, like a tangible force, sending shivers down her spine and raising the hairs on the back of her neck. But she refused to be intimidated. With a steely resolve, Detective Bennett stepped over the threshold and into the darkness beyond. Inside, the air was thick with tension, every shadow seeming to writhe and twist with unseen menace. But she pressed on, her senses on high alert as she prepared to face off against the evil that awaited. And there, in the heart of the cabin, she found him. Nathaniel Blackwood stood before her, his eyes gleaming with a madness that sent shivers down Detective Bennett's spine. But she refused to back down, her gaze unwavering as she prepared to confront the darkness that had consumed him. "You can't hide from the truth, Blackwood," Detective Bennett declared, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. "Your reign of terror ends here and now." But Blackwood only laughed, a cold, humorless sound that echoed through the cabin like a death knell. "You think you can stop me, Detective?" he sneered, his voice laced with contempt. "You're nothing but a pawn in a game far bigger than you can imagine." But Detective Bennett refused to be swayed by Blackwood's empty threats. With a sense of grim determination, she squared her shoulders and prepared to face off against the darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. And as the two adversaries stood locked in a deadly standoff, the shadows closed in around them, threatening to swallow them whole. But amidst the darkness, a glimmer of light remained, a beacon of hope that refused to be extinguished. For in the heart of Whispering Pines, Detective Sarah Bennett stood as a symbol of courage and resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable darkness. And as she faced off against the shadows that threatened to consume her, she knew that she would do whatever it took to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. The morning sun rose slowly over Whispering Pines, casting its golden light upon the town's quiet streets. Detective Sarah Bennett stood alone outside the cabin, the remnants of the previous night's battle still fresh in her mind. But amidst the wreckage and despair, a sense of calm washed over her, a feeling of peace born from the knowledge that the darkness had been vanquished, if only for a moment. With a heavy heart, Detective Bennett made her way through the deserted streets, her footsteps echoing in the silence like a dirge for the lives lost and the innocent shattered. But amidst the pain and sorrow, she felt a glimmer of hope, a faint whisper of possibility that refused to be silenced. As she reached the police station, Detective Bennett was met by the weary faces of her colleagues, their eyes haunted by the horrors of the night before. But she refused to be deterred. With a steely resolve, she gathered her team and began the arduous task of piecing together the fragments of a shattered town, of rebuilding what had been broken and healing what had been scarred. But amidst the chaos and despair, Detective Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that there was still work to be done, that the shadows that had consumed Whispering Pines were far from finished. For she knew that the darkness that lurked within the hearts of men was a force far more powerful than any she had ever faced, a force that could never truly be vanquished. But she refused to give in to despair. With a sense of grim determination, Detective Bennett vowed to continue the fight, to confront the darkness within herself and within the town until the light prevailed. For she knew that in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the strength and resilience with which they faced it. And as the sun rose high in the sky, casting its warm embrace upon the town, Detective Sarah Bennett stood tall amidst the ruins of Whispering Pines, a beacon of hope in a world consumed by shadows. And as she faced the uncertainty of the future, she knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, she would always be guided by the light that burned bright within her soul.